So that one is pretty cool. Okay, so now we're I get a lot of questions about mosses, and so I just want to preempt your questions a little bit and answer a couple of them before we get to the end. So these are frequently asked questions or myths about mosses. The moss is killing my lawn. Is the moss killing my lawn? Well, no. The moss isn't killing your lawn. You are. No. You are providing better habitat for moss than you are for your lawn. So, yeah, people on the west side in Seattle, they have, lots of problems with moss in the lawns. I actually have moss in my lawn, but I like it. It's really, it's nice it's nice and squishy on the feet. You don't have to mow it as much. So mosses are not parasitic. They're not stealing away all the nutrients from the lawn. They're not excreting chemicals for their competition. They're growing opportunistically where the conditions are right for it to grow. So if you're really set on having your lawn grow better than the moss, there's a few things you can do. You can provide more light, trim back your bushes, let the sunlight come in, use shade-tolerant grass species, aerate the ground to reduce the compaction, and really limit the watering, because the mosses are there because it's nice and moist and happy for them. And lawn doesn't need that much water, so if you water it less, it might help outcompete the moss that's growing there. There are some, oh no. So people will ask, well, can I Roundup it? No, you can't Roundup it. Roundup and 2,4-D, those types of chemicals don't generally work on mosses. Yeah, they'll probably absorb it and enter it into the food chain and Chernobyl all over again. So these products like Moss Out, there's Moss Out for your lawn, and those are usually high in iron to kill the moss. There's Moss Out for cement and roofs, and those usually have some type of surfactant or detergent in them that kills the moss. So there are products out there if they're important to you. So the moss is hurting my roof. This is another thing you see. Well, yes, the mosses actually can hurt your roof. So you do want to try and do some maintenance. We don't have as much problem around here, right? So the way that it hurts your roof, if you're talking to your son or mom or somebody who lives in Seattle, you can share this information with them. The moss is because they're holding the water, and that can cause more decay on your roof and break down the integrity of either those asphalt tiles or those shingles that are on there, and they can cause more freeze-thaw action, so those shingles can come looser sooner without that moss on there. So if you need to know, there's lots of sites online where you can go and learn how to do this, but generally it's some sort of mechanical removal of the moss clumps and then some sort of chemical or home brew that you put up there to keep the moss from growing back. But it's kind of you have to keep doing it sort of thing. It's a maintenance level type of thing. Are there any moss weeds? There's two types of weeds, right? Things that just grow anywhere that, you can think of. So you think of a dandelion, it's not really hurting anything, but they grow everywhere, right? So there's a couple of those. There's probably more than a couple, but there's weedy species that are like disturbed areas, like they're fairly cosmopolitan. So this is the fire moss we sing about, Ceratodon purpureus. Likes disturbed soils, really hard to identify. It's like you tricked the first 50 times you see it because it looks different every time you identify it, but then you know its secrets and it doesn't trick you anymore. And then this is Bryum argenteum. Silvertip moss probably is what it's called. This is the one that grows in the sidewalks that you see in urban areas. It's not hurting anything. There is one introduced invasive type species. So this was it's a South American moss. It was a known weedy species in Europe early in the 1900s. And then in 1967, it was found in California, and now it extends from California up to BC. It's not too much of a problem because it needs really high moisture, right along the coast, really high humidities, so we're not going to get it over here. And it's mostly invading disturbed areas, but they really see the potential that it could affect native habitats and start outcompeting some species in the native habitat. So that's Canthylopus interflexus. So they can be kind of aggressive a little bit. I think that's it. So I will take any questions if you have them. Yes. Yeah.
You said that they don't like have ways to draw it in, or they just absorb it from the air. So doesn't he talk about how the soil will come in and warm up to grow, you know, they kind of get the soil on top of them, or they make the soil like dust and dirt where it gets in there and then warm up. So do they somehow utilize that stuff, or?
Yeah, so the question is about how they're absorbing nutrients. So they don't have the root structure, so they're not drying it up from any type of soil underneath them. They are getting it through their leaves and their shoots, just absorbing when they are wet. When the moss cushions are forming, when dust comes out on top of them, that will be a source of nutrients for them. They'll suck in any nutrients they can get from that dust that lands on them, and then they grow up through that dust. And it gets bigger and gets bigger. Yeah, and the different species will key in on that mineral soil and start inhabiting them and making it more organic, so then different species can come along. Amy?
In addition to the, like putting moss on wounds, things like that, are there any other like medicinal qualities of mosses or liverworts, something like that?
So the question is about mosses. Are there any other medicinal properties that we could use? And mosses, especially sphagnum, they're very acidic, and so they don't allow bacteria to grow within their system, and so they are very good antiseptic. So if you go to Survivorpedia, that is one of their secrets, is that you can use mosses, especially sphagnum, to dress a wound, and that will prevent some infection from happening and kind of be that absorbent layer that you need to dress that wound. Other medicinal, like the radula we talked about with the chemicals in them that are marijuana-like, those might be able to be used for different medical purposes. Some of the liverworts actually have a tasting test. They taste peppery. And I don't know if those chemicals have any like medicinal use. I don't know if you could use it to spice your food, I guess, if you really wanted to. But those are the only ones that I know of. The question is, are there any poisonous mosses? And I don't think so. There is in these wetlands, it can harbor a fungus that can, if it enters an open wound, can kind of cause a cankerous infection. And even breathing in can be kind of unhealthy. So sometimes I wonder when I'm squishing around in the really smushy places if I should have a mask on or something, but haven't gotten sick yet.
What sort of effects are people who study bryophytes expecting from the global rise in global temperature and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere?
Yeah, so mosses are a good source of drawing in that carbon dioxide, so we want to keep our mosses healthy and strong in our peatlands, especially up in those northern areas, to be that carbon sink for us. Changes in climate, we're going to get warmer and drier, right, especially around here. And since the ecological amplitude of mosses is greater than it is for vascular plants, they probably won't be quite as impacted as, say, you know, those rare plants up on the top of the Olympic Mountains, that's only where they occur. And because spores are more airborne and versatile, I would imagine that as the forest types change, as the different habitats change, that the colonization of the species to their new habitats will happen easier than it will for a vascular plant that has more large, cumbersome seeds that can't get that far that fast. So they might be more of an indicator of the change because they are so specific in their habitat requirements that the drying out might be used as an indicator that that's happening faster than you could see it in a vascular plant population. Those are just some of my speculations on that issue. Anybody else?
Yeah, how did your interest or love of mosses come around? Did they just kind of grow on you?
Been making all right for that one, haven't you? So, yeah, I got my undergrad at the University of Washington in botany, and I got one of my first paying botany jobs here in Tenasca. So I came here, and that was right when all the spotted owl stuff was happening on the west side, and these mosses and lichens and fungi and snails and mollusks, all these little creatures started occurring on the rare species list. And people were like, oh my gosh, what do we do with these? So there were some trainings, and I started learning about mosses, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I had always thought when I ended my bachelor's, I thought, I think I want to do a master's, but I don't know what I want to do it in. And so it was after a few years of learning mosses and figuring, you know, there aren't very many people that like these things, and I couldn't see this niche developing for somebody to be able to identify mosses. And so I sought out a program and went up to the University of Alberta under Dale Vitt, who's a really well-known biologist, and got to study under him for 3 years, and then moved back down here and get to use this knowledge for fun.
I understand that in the peat bogs, you know, where there's a lot of commercial development for miracle grows, there's overconsumption, or is that causing those habitats from people digging up the mosses and overusing them? How much they grow?
Right, so the question is about digging up of peatlands for peat moss, and is that really a renewable resource? The companies, of course, are claiming that it's a renewable resource because the sphagnum will grow. It is a bit renewable. The sphagnum will grow. They say that those areas that they disturb will fill in within about 5 years and go back into more of a normal type of habitat within 10 to 15. I don't think it's returned to its previously dug up state. The species are different, so it's just like a forest. Yeah, you can get a forest with trees 100 feet tall, but they're all the same species and they're all this big around, right? And as the trees of the forest develop and things change, you get more old growth, you get this diversity of species in an older forest. The same is true in a peatland, where you might get the peat growing back in and filling in within 5 to 10 years, but it's all going to be a pretty monotonous species composition within that area. So it kind of depends on who you talk to. If you're on a website that is a peat producer, they say, yeah, it's totally renewable. Let's dig it up and here, have it for your garden. But I think the species diversity and the amount that is happening is really more detrimental than it is beneficial for those areas.
Is there any Schistosphega pinnata in eastern Washington, or have you seen it in Okanagan County?
I have not found it in Okanagan County. I have looked at a lot of root wads, and now I've actually seen it, so my search image is better. The only known location that I know of in Okanagan County is over near the crest, outside of Winthrop,
Okay.
and it's up like on Washington Pass.
I look at every root wad too. But
Yeah, you really want to see that glowing back. It's pretty cool. I had to take my family back to there Anyway. So they've all seen it.